Welcome to this Maths Made Easy video on the sine and cosine rules. And to start with, let's take a look at the sine rule. So the question here is, when do we use the sine rule? And we use the sine rule when we have two angles and one side. So if we just note that down here, so we use the sine rule when we have two angles and one side, or one side length there. Okay. So the second thing we need to know, or be aware of here, is the actual rule for the sine rule. And the rule is as follows. And we denote the rule here as A over sine A is equal to B over sine B. And finally, this is equal to C over sine C there. Okay. And that simply gives us our result for the sine rule there. Moving on to the cosine rule now. Again, we need to understand the situation in which we can use the cosine rule, and then we want to give the actual result itself. So regarding the cosine rule, we use this when we have two side lengths and one angle in between, or all three sides. So let's just note this down here. So we use this when we have two side lengths. So two side lengths. And we know the angle, or one angle in between. So one angle in between as well. Or we use this when we have all three sides here. Okay? Or all three sides. Okay, so those are the two situations in which we would require the use of the cosine rule. So now let's give the actual result itself. And the rule simply follows as a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cos a. And that result there simply gives us the cosine rule. Moving on now to find the area of any triangle. And here this formula can be used for any pair of sides where the angle in between is known. Okay? And the formula is simply as follows here. So we write this as the area is equal to a half of AB, so A times B times by sine of C there. Okay. Remember, we use this formula here when we have any pair of sides where the angle in between is known. So let's just write that down here. So pair of sides with known angle in between. Okay. And that result there simply gives us the formula that we require for the area of any triangle. And finally, we can make some notes here regarding the sine and cosine rule. And we have one issue that might potentially arise when solving geometrical problems involving the sine and cosine rules. And that arises when we have two sides and an angle that doesn't lie in between, then we have an issue. In this case, we need to find a little more information about the system, and we usually do that by inspecting the surrounding system there. Okay, so the issue here is if we have two sides that we know, and we have an angle that doesn't lie in between. So the angle does not lie in between. Okay, this is when we have an issue here. And in that case there, like we've just said, we would usually need to inspect the surrounding system there. So that concludes this Maths Made Easy video on the sine and cosine rules.